Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Colonati. Today I'm going to finally film my thoughts on Dhalgren by Samuel R. Delany. This is a classic science fiction novel published in 1974, and I would say now that given its history and how people perceive it, you could almost call it a cult classic. On the back, it is described as being hugely controversial, ambitious, and Delany's most popular novel. It was actually like a bestseller when it was published in the 1970s. I agree with those adjectives, by the way. It's got some pretty controversial content in it. It does seem ambitious, but not overly so. And I can see why, when this was published, given its content and its themes, why it was so popular. It's very, very much founded in social and cultural themes from the 1960s and 70s. You will recognize if you know anything about like 1960s counterculture, the hippies, the sexual revolution, the civil rights movement, gay rights back then, you're gonna recognize it in this novel. That's what this novel seems to be about. So the story is about a man who does remember his life, but he doesn't remember his name, and he's eventually given the name the Kid. We're just gonna call him Kid. And Kid comes to the city of Bologna. It's a larger Midwestern city that has something catastrophic that's happened to it. It is burning, or it has burned. It's been mostly abandoned, and the people who live there, the people who come there, are kind of in this anarchic, chaotic state of forming gangs and just living on your own, practically on the streets and abandoned buildings and making it on their own. And the story is about how the Kid meets a bunch of people. He meets Tack, who shows him around. He meets Lanya, who is initially living in the park with some hippies who want to set up a commune. He meets a family called the Richards, they're the weirdest people in the story because they are trying to pretend that nothing unusual has happened. And he helps them move from one apartment to another apartment in the building they're living in. I'm not kidding. It's like 100 or more pages of the story are devoted to him helping them move. And eventually he somehow, it's a mystery even to him, becomes the leader of a scorpion gang. And the scorpions are... I understand they're supposed to be a fictionalized version of the Hells Angels. I don't know that much about the history of the Hells Angels, but I'm gonna guess that back in the 60s and 70s that was a big thing, and people understand that more will understand the Scorpions more, but they're basically a bunch of disaffected teenagers and 20-somethings running around being, like, they have a more scary reputation than what their actions would merit, but it's a gang. And he somehow becomes a gang leader. That sounds a bit more scary than it actually is. Anyway, there is this increasing sense that something is falling apart. And is it the Kid's mind? Is it the city? Is it other characters? And you just don't know what's going on. One of the long-running threads throughout the story is that the Kid finds a notebook in the park when he first comes to Bologna, and it already has writing in it. One side of every page has been written on, but he can't find the original owner, and he begins writing in it himself. He starts writing and revising poetry. His writing of poetry makes him kind of famous in the city. There's this whole storyline about his poetry that was very interesting, and a lot of things that I actually tabbed at the beginning of the book were parts where the Kid is writing or editing his poetry, and he has these weird emotional reactions. I'm not quite sure what's going on in his head, but it was almost, at first I was reading it like it was a commentary on what writers really feel when they're writing, editing, and publishing works. I could see that being something that Delany stuck in there, because I've kind of learned that Delany is a pretty obsessively perfectionist writer, and I could kind of see a lot of him in that. Another really interesting thing about this book that I want to mention is the structure of it. It is a Mobius strip. It is circular. The first sentence in the book is the last half of an unfinished sentence. It is to wound the autumnal city. And the last sentence in the book is the first half of that. So the entire structure, not just the sentences, but the entire structure of the book means it can be read in a continuous loop. And it starts out really confusing with like garbled language, and then it gets clearer and more lucid as you get to know about Kid and he gets to meet people. And at the end, it starts to devolve back into that kind of garbled nonsense language. You start to lose the thread of what's going on, and then you just keep doing it. So it's confusing and then clear and then confusing and then clear. Once again, I think that might say something about the theme of like mental illness in the book and what people can't remember, what the main character can't remember and what he does remember. I am not going to pretend in any way that I understand the story enough to give a more coherent or more detailed explanation of what it's about. The only other thing that I gotta talk about, I guess, is the themes, the 1960s counterculture, which I cannot speak about in any depth or with really any intelligence because it's just an area of history that I don't know that much about. I think that primarily this book is focusing on the sexual revolution, gay rights, and like the civil rights movement and the relationships between white characters and black characters, or characters of color, because the main character isn't black, but he is half Native American and half white. For the sexual revolution and like gay rights, there is a lot of sex in this book. I'm just gonna say this is the one thing that I really didn't like about this book. It's probably the only thing that I can point at in this entire book and say, I didn't like that, and that was the sex. It was just, for me personally, way too much. The main character has about 4 sexual encounters in the first 120 pages. And that sets the tone for the rest of the book. It's like every 20 or 30 pages there is going to be a sexual encounter or some type of long kind of graphic discussion of sex. There's and of all sorts of kinds and varieties and types. I mean, the main character has random sex with a woman, random sex with a guy, random sex with a woman, then he eventually becomes part of a polyamorous relationship, so you get 3 or 4 pretty graphic threesome scenes. And I say graphic, I don't mean erotic, I don't mean like this is pornographic or it's supposed to be erotic and passionate or whatever. No, it's not fun to read. It doesn't light a fire or anything. It's very de-eroticized. There's only one relationship in the entire book that I thought had emotional intimacy as well as sexual intimacy. I could kind of get more into that, but the level of detail and how it's presented, the situations, the characters, how things come about, it made the sex so uncomfortable and I didn't want to read them. I didn't skip any pages though. I read everything. I think it's also very true that there's a reason why Delany did this, of course. If you know anything about Delany, I don't know much about him, but apparently he has been very sexually promiscuous and involved with both men and women, and probably also in relationships, polyamorous relationships. I think that's the term to use. So once again, might be kind of autobiographical there, and I'm not going to pick that apart. I'm just going to say it was not my kind of thing. It is something I would put a warning label on this book and say, do not hand this to a young person. I think even older people might find the presentation of the sexual themes in this book to be a little off-putting, and that's part of the story itself. The other thing, of course, is mental illness and how that affects the story. You're really left wondering about whether all the crazy stuff going on is because you're seeing the story through an incorrect perception of reality because you're seeing it through the kid's eyes, or could it just be that he is going crazy, but so is the world around him, so might other people around him? There could be a lot of theories about that. I'm sure somebody else has tried to figure it out better than I have, but I don't know enough to really talk about mental illness, and I don't know that much about how people interpret this story about being about mental illness. But I think that's the thing that really kept me guessing throughout the entire story, and I was working really hard to put together the pieces to see if I could get an answer out of that theme. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is the writing style and the high quality of the writing, which is what I enjoyed, what I really, really enjoyed paying attention to, and made it easier to read this book, is that it's very well written. I don't think the writing is beautiful. I wouldn't call it like lyrical. In fact, in some places it almost felt clunky. But there's this incredible sense of purpose and intent. I was just bowled over because I felt like every word on the page was chosen and strung together in that particular order for a purpose, for an effect. And there's like no other way to do it. You cannot do it any other way. This is exactly the way that Delany intended it to be. I've never read a book where I thought that the writing was so purposeful. It could be difficult to read, it could be difficult to interpret and understand what a sentence actually meant, but enough of that combined to just make me think it's supposed to be this way, the author wanted it to be this way, and there's a clue in there somewhere. So my verdict on this book is that I liked it. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars, which I think is still a pretty darn good rating for a book that I did struggle with at times, that I did really not enjoy reading about the sex in it at all, and that I didn't understand. You know, there's some loss there for me of not understanding because I don't know what I can take away from the book, and I felt a little unsatisfied when I finished it. Like, I felt accomplished because I had finished the book, but I also felt a little bit empty because I didn't know what sort of meaning I was going to take away from it. I still don't know. I don't know at all. I'm just really proud that I finished the book. There are 2 groups of people I think are going to read this book. One is the group of people who love Delany and want to read everything he's ever written. If you're a fan of Delany and Delany's life, you're going to read Dhalgren. This is going to happen. The other group, which I'm a part of, is a group of people who've heard that the book is difficult and controversial and just want to climb that mountain and have that sense of accomplishment. It is challenging, it is ambitious, and it definitely is controversial, but it's also rewarding to get through it, and I think there is so much room for everybody to make their own interpretations and get their own messages out of this book. I'm going to repeat advice given to me about reading Dhalgren, which is don't read Dhalgren first. I read Babel 17 first. I think that was a really, really good thing. I've also been told that you should maybe read Nova or The Einstein Intersection or Empire Star first. Just don't make Dhalgren your first Delany book because that would be really difficult. So that is the end of my ramble about Dhalgren by Samuel R. Delany. If you've read this book, or anything else by Delany that you would recommend to me, that you think other people should read, please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, especially because I think it's going to be a really weird video to watch. I feel like this has not made any sense at all. But if you stuck this far, thank you, and I will be back to talk to you again in my next video. Bye.